You'll notice in this first video clip that the scene is totally overexposed, and that is because I made the assumption if the camera had auto ISO, like all the other cameras that I've used, that it would be the preferred way of doing it in video. Usually, the way I learned in video school is you set a frames per second, let's say 24, then you find the nearest shutter speed, let's say 1/50th of a second, use an appropriate aperture for the depth of field you want, and then you control the exposure in auto ISO, sometimes needing to correct a little bit with exposure compensation. And I've shot a ton of videos that way, and that's the way it should be done for great control of rolling shutter. The reason for that ratio of using a shutter speed twice your frame rate is it stays in sync with what your sensor scans. The sensor scans from the top to bottom, and by using those settings you prevent rolling shutter, or at least minimize it. But not so on the Canon M50. Canon has crippled this camera so that auto ISO doesn't work in the video mode. And I learned that the hard way. I had to spend an hour on the phone with Canon finding out that they don't support that in video. Also, using their recommended auto video mode, the camera was very slow to do any exposure corrections in the video. It's almost like the exposure is burned in at the beginning of the clip. So that's a big strike against this camera. I can't even believe that my old entry-level D3300 did this properly 7 years ago, and my 5-year-old G7X just does a beautiful job. But no, not on the M50.
Now, one of the things that my dad taught me back when I first started in photography, and this is very important, if you're going to be shooting people, and that's basically what we're doing here, put yourself in the shade, and that way the camera can keep up with all the settings. If you're going in and out of the sun, you're going to have part of your face that's overexposed and part of it that's underexposed. So let's get back to the basics of photography here for just a second. And I learned this doing portraiture. So if I move myself into the shade here, now that is a lot better exposure, and all I did is move myself into the shade. So I can't expect the camera to compensate for those huge shifts, but it is slow in compensating for the exposure shift. Okay, I'm back recording. I'm back in auto exposure for video, and you can see with the bright background, the bright sky, that I'm just horribly underexposed. As I switch out to being in the sun a little more, I expect that the camera will handle that. It has all the latitudes available to it. So right now, for vlogging, the auto is actually doing a better job of handling the contrasty day that I'm in. So again, for my friends on YouTube that asked for this, I'm shooting in standard picture profile, and I'm right now, because of the variable light, I'm in auto white balance. If I had consistent light, I would choose a better white balance for the light. For instance, if it was a real cloudy day, I would use the Canon white balance profile at cloudy. If it was a completely sunshine day, I would use sunshine. You know, I've been shooting on some kind of Canon platform for about 5 years now, so I'm still learning how the specs work and how everything works. My blogging with this little tripod is working out really well. I actually have extended quite a bit out in front of me, and I can see that there's a reason why people buy the wider lenses for vlogging. It makes it much easier to keep yourself in frame. So far so good. You know, obviously as I go in and out of the shadows of the trees, you know, it's helping a lot. I'm going to try to swing this around, and I won't be able to see what I'm filming here, but you can. It's a nice trail to walk on. Again, I'm just using the auto modes here just for simplicity. Sometimes having the right composition and the correct exposure is more important about the rules as far as doubling the frame rate with the shutter. The camera right now is doing a better job. It couldn't keep up with it with auto ISO. I am a little disappointed.
Well, just want to start talking about how I'm looking forward to the dual pixel autofocus. The autofocus quits working on this camera. I swung it around for that little brief episode. I have a focus square around my face, but it never requires focus. In fact, you'll see me pull the camera in to arm's length and I'm touching the tracking square, and I know I'm outside of the minimum focus distance for the lens, and I cannot get autofocus to work again. Ultimately, I have to shut the camera down, and once I restart the camera, then I can establish my face tracking. I'm going to include a little video here real quickly of my G7X just to show you how much better it does on finding my face, and I haven't done a firmware update in that camera in years. So this is a deal breaker for me with this camera. In this little last part of this clip, you'll notice I try various distances from my face. I'm verifying the settings on the screen, and the only way I can reestablish autofocus is to restart the camera.
Alright, so here I am out with my trusty G7X. I've had this camera since early 2015, and I was really disappointed with the image quality yesterday of my M5. I'll see who's trying to call me right now. Anyway, I'm going to hang this blog up, or hang this call up. Hello?
This is a courtesy call for...
This clip was destined to be an outtake. However, it shows the better exposure and the stickiness of the face tracking on my old G7X compared to the M50.
Alright, we have a very pretty spot. This is kind of the convergence of several of these trails that all come together here on the Katy Trail. And this is a place where we always stop at this bench, kind of empty the rocks out of our shoes. A lot of these benches have been donated in memory of loved ones. And so this is kind of a favorite area for my wife and myself. We bought our home to be close to this trail network, and as you can see, it's a very lovely area, and we always have what we call magic moments in Missouri where we look for wildlife. If I wasn't talking, I'd be very likely to come across a raccoon or a deer or something like that. Interesting, I was walking along vlogging and the camera shut itself down, and you know, no overheating, just extremely unusual that it would do that. I was going to show as I come around here and get a little more light, fair light, the camera does a lot better job. But right now I'm trying to test about the digital image stabilization. I don't know why it shut itself down, and so I'm going to have a lot of questions too. I've never had a camera that does some of the weird stuff that this camera does.
In conclusion, with a sample size of 1, I can't recommend this camera. I did have another episode of the autofocus quit working. That time I shut the camera down and took the battery out. I had this problem with the camera quitting later on in the shooting after trying that. I'm trying to be a little bit brief, but I cannot recommend this camera. For the sake of having a good time doing video and photography, which is my passion, I went out the next day with my G7X for comparison purposes, and I'll have that video up here, and I'll call it Having Fun Color Grading or something silly like that, because this is about having fun. But this camera is going back, and that's been amplified after talking to Canon technical support. I cannot recommend this camera.